Hello, welcome to Raymond Castile's basement of horror. Today we're going to look at a series of monster buttons. Not like these buttons that fasten my shirt, but pinback buttons. Buttons with a little needle that sticks you when you try to put them on. As a kid, I was always afraid of those buttons. I'm still afraid of those buttons. I'm always sure when I put them on that I'm going to stick myself. I hate needles. I don't like getting shots. I have to have blood drawn. Well, lately, every month, I have to have blood drawn and tested. And I hate it every time. I can't look at it. I can't look at the needle. I don't want to see it. So every time I put on, which isn't very often, but every time I put on a pinback button, I'm always sure that needle's just gonna stab me. It scares me. I'm scared of these things. Okay, let's look at these. So, this is what I'm talking about. See that scary needle? Look at that. That could put your eye out. You don't want to mess with that. Look at that needle. This is called a pinback button because you undo the needle and you stick it through your clothes and ruin your good clothes by putting holes in them. I don't like that either. And then you fasten it like what they call not a clothespin, baby pin. Is that what it's called? What do you call those stupid things that have the little needle that, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. So you put them on your clothes, you ruin your clothes, you draw blood and stick yourself with them. They're called pinback buttons. And these are, well, kind of from the 60s. We're going to talk about that. They're generally considered to be 60s items. These are made by Elwar, E-L-W-A-R, Elwar. And that's kind of a mystery too. There's a lot of mysteries wrapped up around these little buttons. These are 3.5 inches wide. They were sold, these particular versions were sold in Famous Monsters magazine in the 1970s. And there's a whole series of them that we're going to look at. But there's some confusion about these. Now, take a good look at this one. This is what I guess you would say this is the standard version, the one that you're most likely to find. But I used to own another one. Now let's take a look at that one. It looks different, doesn't it? Now let's look at this one again. See, they're different. The artwork is different. I mean, it's similar, obviously it's the same character, same general portrait looking off to the side, but it's not the same painting. Let's look at the other one again. See, it's rougher. The texture, the style of painting is a little rougher. And the name, the Phantom, is smaller. Now let's look at this one again. See, the Phantom, the name is bigger, and the artwork is smoother, it's more polished, it's more refined. So what's that other button? I used to own it. I don't own it anymore. I sold it. That other button is generally considered to be the first series version of this Elwar set. But there's a mystery as to whether it was really made by Elwar. So before we confuse you too much, let's just talk about this more common set, the Elwar button set. And it does say, these do say Elwar on them. They say, copyright Universal Pictures Company, Inc., printed in USA, manufactured by Elwar Limited, New York City. I don't know if this will show up on camera. Well, I don't know if you're able to really see that or not, but there's, on the edge, there there is some tiny text that identifies these buttons as being licensed Universal Studios items manufactured by Elwar. I hope you were able to see it. I mean, it's kind of hard for that to pick up on camera. Well, let's just run through these. We can talk more about them. So here's the Frankenstein. The artwork on these is just really, really good. They're beautiful looking. You know how I've said with a few things that this season, certain things are iconic 60s monster items or staples of monster collecting. That's what these Elwar buttons are. These are iconic monster items, I should say with an asterisk, 60s monster items. And they are a staple of most monster collections. If you have a big monster memorabilia collection, chances are you've got these buttons, at least a few of them. And we do know where these came from. I believe, I mean, it's not the buttons, the imagery. We do know where these images came from. This Frankenstein image, I believe, is taken from the 1965 Famous Monsters Yearbook. It's at least similar to that, if not identical, it's similar to that. And all these buttons, the artwork came from somewhere else. None of these are completely original designs. Like this Phantom is inspired by issue number 3 of Famous Monsters magazine. The cover of issue 3 of Famous Monsters magazine has a painting of the Phantom that looks a lot like this. Not exactly like this, but very similar. So obviously that was the inspiration. Now let's look at Count Dracula. Now he definitely looks like Bela Lugosi, doesn't he? He has a nice Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein kind of a Bela Lugosi vibe. And a lot of Dracula merchandise from the 60s to the present does not look like Bela Lugosi, so it's cool when something does look like him. I'm going to look at the edge of this in a second and see if it has a universal copyright. Wouldn't it be interesting if this didn't, this particular one? I'm sure it does, but let me just check. Let's just be sure. I'm sure it does. Yep, there it is, Universal Pictures. That would have been interesting if the Dracula didn't have a universal copyright. So this Dracula, and we're going to see a different version in a minute, is sort of inspired by the 6-foot Dracula poster that was also sold through Famous Monsters magazine and Warren Publishing magazines. They sold this through mail order, the 6-foot poster of Dracula. Now, the poster doesn't look exactly like this, but there's another button that does look more like that poster, so we'll get into that. First, let's get through all these. Let's look at the Mummy. Here's the Mummy. And we have a beautiful image of Caris, or Caris, Lon Chaney Jr. as Caris, with the bloody eye and everything. I love it. The bloody eye and the bloody fingertips. That's the Mummy. You don't see that Mummy anymore. All you ever see is Imhotep, Boris Karloff. I sure wish we'd get back to good old Lon Chaney Jr. as Caris, the Mummy. And that was the standard Mummy in the 60s and 70s. All the merchandising was based on Caris. This image is inspired by artwork on the Famous Monsters Speak record. The cover art for the Famous Monsters Speak LP. And we'll see that it's not the only one inspired by that cover art. And I don't own that record, otherwise I'd be holding it right now. I have listened to it. I think I checked it out of the library 20 years ago. I think that's how I heard it. I played it on a stereo. That's a weird record. It's not what you think it's going to be when you look at the cover and you imagine, what could this be? I guess the Frankenstein part kind of is, but the Dracula part is like this Anne Rice urban vampire fantasy, but with Bela Lugosi's Dracula in it. It's weird. That's a weird album. Okay, so it was the Mummy. Well, let's look at the Wolfman. Now, there's Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. And this is the hardest one to find of the set. The Wolfman is the most sought-after, desirable one. I mean, he's gettable, but he's a little harder than the others. Maybe, I don't know, maybe things have changed since, I mean, it's been a long time since I really investigated these or had any idea what the market was, but back in the day, it was actually quite hard to get the Wolfman. I don't think it was slightly harder, it was much harder to get the Wolfman. And he would go for a lot more money. I don't know what they're going for now, but once upon a time, most of them were going for like 40, 50 bucks. And then the Creature was maybe $100, and the Wolfman was like 200 or 300 bucks. Now I have no idea what they're going for now. They could be going for a fraction of that or double that. I don't know. I didn't check. I don't know what the prices are. And when it comes to prices, I've learned that I should hold all these a little closer, shouldn't I? Look, that looks much better. Yeah, I think I'll go back through these and hold these a little closer to the camera. Yeah, when I haven't gone over recent prices, so I have no idea what the market is for these things. But there's the Wolfman, and this one's also taken, this artwork is also taken from the Famous Monsters Speak record. It's not lifted exactly, I mean, it's not the same artwork, but it's inspired by it, it's copied from it. Here's the Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I guess the Creature has been condemned to hell for his sins because it's fire behind him. Why is the Creature engulfed in fire? I guess that's the Creature right before his gills and scales are burned away and the Creature walks among us. Poor Creature. Yeah, you'd think maybe he would be in water or something, but no, he's in fire. And I love that lumpy-looking, lopsided, red-lipped Creature. That's what the Creature ought to look like. I like that. And this Creature is, the artwork is also inspired by the Famous Monsters Speak LP. And I should have gone through all of these and held them a little closer, so let's just quickly go back through them and give you a closer look. There's Dracula. And just to show you what the backs look like again. There's that scary pin that I don't like. And there's a variation on the shape of those holes. These have round holes, and the harder to find versions have rectangular holes. So, you know, that Phantom I told you about a minute ago, the harder to find different Phantom that I used to own, that had rectangular holes. So, let's just look at them again. Here's good old Frankie. Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster. classic 60s artwork. Here's the mummy with his bloody hand. And finally, here's Phantom. So these are definitely made by Elwar, and they were sold in Famous Monsters in the early 70s. I think the first ad appeared in 1972, but people swear that they saw these versions in the 1960s. And that different Phantom that I showed you, that I used to own, that definitely comes from the 1960s, because we have photos of Forrest J. Ackerman wearing those early versions of the Elwar buttons, the first series versions. Some people call them the prototype versions. I don't think they're prototypes, I just think they're an earlier version of the buttons. So we have photos from the mid-1960s of Forrest Ackerman wearing those buttons. So we know they existed in the 60s, those earlier versions. We don't know for sure about these later versions. So before we go on, let's look at some pictures of the earlier Elwar, I say that kind of with quotes, Elwar buttons, because we're not sure if Elwar made them. But let's look at some pictures of them. My friend Hugo Hernandez supplied these photos from his collection. He's got a fantastic monster collection, all kinds of stuff, but he's also got a wonderful button collection. He really went all out assembling a definitive collection of these monster buttons. He has the early versions and the later versions. The early versions are not marked. My Phantom was not marked. It didn't have the Universal Studios Elwar information on it. The early ones are not marked, so we don't know for sure whether Elwar made those early buttons. Now you'll notice in Hugo's photos that he's got some smaller buttons, and he has this card. What is this card? It's the display card for a vending machine, like a bubblegum machine, where you put the coin in and turn the knob and a prize would come out. And that card would go in the glass window of the machine. And the machine would sell these little buttons. So these are the buttons like what you saw in Hugo's photo. Let's see how they're looking here. So it's actually, I was going to take these out of this little bag, but I think it's easier to show you these things if I just leave them in. I can certainly hold them better. So you see these little buttons, they're 7/8 inches wide, 7/8 of an inch wide, and they look like little mini Elwar buttons, and they are. These are definitely made by Elwar. But they're not the same artwork. The artwork on these little buttons resembles the earlier 60s unmarked buttons. Maybe it doesn't just resemble, I mean, it is the same artwork, it's just black and white instead of full color. So these are miniature versions of the earlier Elwar buttons. And these little buttons are made by Elwar. I don't know if they're marked or not. Yeah, they are. Boy, that's tiny, tiny. I don't know if I can read that. Printed in USA. There's Elwar, Elwar Limited. Yeah, so it does. They do say Elwar on them. Let's see here. Universal Pictures, manufactured by Elwar. Yeah, so these are made by Elwar for sure. And that card that would go in the window of the vending machine also says Elwar on it. So there's no doubt these are absolutely Elwar, and these versions are absolutely Elwar. But what about those early versions, like the ones Hugo has in his collection, and like that Phantom that I had? Are those made by Elwar? Well, here is an image that came from the Warren archives. Warren magazine sold a bunch of their visual materials years ago, and they put them on eBay, and they said that the material was from the Warren archives. And I think the only thing I got from that was a Topstone related image. So I did get something from that sale, but not much, just one thing. This image is from that big sale when the Warren archives, well, they emptied the archive and they sold all the images, and this is one of them. So what we're looking at here is the original art for the first series 3.5-inch buttons, the early versions, and these handwritten instructions indicate that the artwork should be shrunk down for the small buttons. So they're planning on making the small buttons at this time. Now this art, this I don't know what you would call this image. I mean, I know what it's a picture of. It's a picture of the original art for the buttons, but I don't know what you would call the image itself. Is it a proof? I'm not sure. But it obviously proves that those early buttons were made by Warren Publishing. And Warren also made, well, they made other buttons. These are not the only buttons Warren made. They made some Munsters TV show buttons. And they had fan club buttons. And I have something. Here it is. So I have a Famous Monsters fan club button. So that's a pinback button for the Famous Monsters fan club. And I think this is made by Warren. Does it have any information on it? I don't know. Let's see if it does. Could be a repro. I don't know. I don't think it is. Let's see if it's got any information on the edge here. Oh, there is something. I wish I had more light. Warren, copyright Warren Publishing Company. Yep. So it has a Warren copyright on it. So there it is, the Famous Monsters fan club button. And this is definitely made by Warren Publishing, and it has the copyright info on the edge. So Warren made buttons. They made this button, they made Munsters buttons, and it looks like they made those early so-called Elwar buttons, those early versions. And so one would assume that if they made the original versions of these buttons with that original artwork, and they had instructions on shrinking them down. Are they talking about these? I would think so. And I've heard that there are little buttons that look like the big buttons, but I've never seen those. I've heard that there are buttons that are full color like this, only they're this size. I haven't seen them. I mean, I heard that they were actually kind of common at one time, but somehow they missed me because I didn't see them. I'm very familiar with these, though. I don't know what the instructions on that Warren archive sheet is referring to, but it seems to me that Elwar, E-L-W-A-R, is most likely related to Warren Publishing. I mean, Warren, W-A-R. Elwar sounds like some kind of connection to the name Warren. And they were sold in, these were sold in the 70s in Famous Monsters magazine. But there's a debate about that. Are those early buttons really made by Elwar? They're made by Warren. Okay, then are these made by Warren? Is Elwar Warren? Then why did they call them Elwar? I don't know. On that Famous Monsters fan club button, it says Warren Publishing. On the Munsters buttons, which I don't have, the Munsters TV show buttons say Warren Publishing on the edge. So the ones we know Warren made actually have the Warren name on them. So why wouldn't Warren put their name on these Elwars, big or small? I don't know. And these Elwar buttons, are they from the 70s or are they from the 60s? They use 60s artwork. Oh, and remember I talked about the 6-foot Dracula. So let's see Hugo's early version Dracula button. See that artwork? Now here's the 6-foot Dracula poster. See, it's much closer to that earlier version. You can really see the resemblance. It's obvious that the early version button was based on the 6-foot Dracula poster. There's no doubt about that. And you might remember on this program that we showed a magic set at the beginning of this season. And the magic set had artwork that was also inspired by that 6-foot Dracula poster. They kind of turned Dracula into Vincent Price. Like, what would it look like if Vincent Price had played Dracula instead of Bela Lugosi? But it's obviously based off that same poster, inspired by the same art. So, these buttons are kind of mysterious. There's some dispute about who actually made them, who is Elwar. As far as we know, Elwar didn't make any other products besides these buttons. So it seems like it was probably a name Warren used, but then why didn't they just use their own name? Who knows? Who knows? But there's some connection there. The little buttons that say Elwar, they're made by Elwar, use the artwork from the earlier big buttons that are definitely from the 60s. And those are made by Warren. And these big buttons are obviously refined versions of those earlier ones with more refined artwork, smoother, more detailed artwork. It looks like someone, either a better artist did them or someone took more time to do them, because they're essentially the same art, they're just more refined. The only one that really has any difference is the Dracula, where you'd think if they'd gotten into trouble over Bela Lugosi's likeness, they would have made it look less like Bela. But I think this version, I think that looks more like Bela compared to the earlier one based on the 6-foot poster. So look at the earlier one and look at this one. Which one do you think looks more like Bela Lugosi? I think this one does. So that's odd. If they would have changed it, they would have, because the early ones, obviously with the pointy hair and other weird things, it's trying to get away from looking like Bela. So why would they? I would think if there was difficulty with the Bela Lugosi likeness, which there always is, they'd be trying to get further away from the likeness, not closer to it. So they're an interesting mystery, like who made these, what was the chronology, are these button sets really related or not, what era are they from? The little buttons, people say they saw those little buttons as late as the 1980s. They actually saw them in vending machines as late as the 1980s. And people say they saw them in the 1960s. So I think the little buttons were introduced in the 60s, but they might have still been lingering around into the early 80s, which isn't that strange for vending machine stuff. There are probably pallets full of those in a warehouse. So yeah, I'm sure that it's not unusual to me that they would keep turning up in vending machines for 15, 20 years. That seems perfectly believable to me. But I don't know that these big buttons, I'm not sure that they were sold, the Elwar ones, anywhere besides Warren Publishing ads. Now, people have said that they've seen, I think, the earlier ones in stores. And the Warren Archives did produce this photo of a phantom button on a card. Now, that's obviously a retail item. That's something that is supposed to be sold in a store. I don't think they would have made that card just for mail order. And I don't know if... Well, there are people who say they remember seeing them on cards. So I do think they released some quantity of these buttons on these cards like this. So this, because that's the earlier version of the Phantom, that would tell me that it was the earlier version. If any of these were sold in stores, they were the early versions. Now, we've gone over the Sokies and the Anchor Hawking glasses, and I think we're probably going to look at the Marx figurines this season. And then along with these buttons, these are all staple items of a classic monster collection. They're not holy grails, they're not super rare, but they're rare enough. You can't just get them any day of the week whenever you want. They do take some hunting, but unless something's happened to the value of these that I don't know about, they're not super expensive and they're not unobtainable. So if you're starting out, or maybe you've been collecting a year or two, and you've gotten like a bunch of new stuff and easy to find stuff, and you want to graduate to a next level, an advanced level, going after slightly more rare items, these would be a good thing to go after. Not the early versions, the unmarked early versions made by Warren. Those are hard. Those are rare. I only got that one Phantom in years of collecting. It's like Hugo having so many of them. That's very impressive. That's advanced collecting. But these, the Elwar marked buttons, unless something's happened in recent years that I don't know about, these are pretty gettable. You can obtain these. You can assemble a set of these. Some other items in that category might be like the Palmer monsters, some of the easier to find mystery games, Hasbro mystery games. So these are some not easy to find, but they're just hard enough that they're impressive. If you're trying to show your collection to someone, you'll get some oohs and ahs, but you don't have to be rich to own these, and it won't take years and years to find them. So I don't know. I didn't plan this season to try to do like a tutorial on these sort of staple items, but that just kind of worked out that way. Once I decided to talk about the classes and the Sokis, it just I saw a theme forming. I think that's probably enough talk about these buttons. I think we've covered them well. I don't know what else to say about them. Thank you, Hugo, for letting me use your photos. I appreciate that. We are drawing near the end of the 4th season of Basement of Horror. We still have a few more episodes left, but we are, as the Beatles would say, we are getting very near the end. And so people who are new to the channel might not know that we go in seasons, like a TV show. I do seasons. And I have a summer hiatus. We take a break in the spring, and then we come back in October. And I usually do a couple of specials, 2 or 3 special episodes over the summer, but I don't do regular weekly episodes. I take a break, and then I come back in October for a new season. So we're getting near the end, so just psychologically prepare yourselves, psychologically, emotionally prepare yourselves for the end of the 4th season. But the good news is, unless I'm hit by a car or a meteor falls on me, there'll be a 5th season starting in October 2022. But this season's not over yet. We still have a few more episodes to go. And as I said, I think we're going to look at Mark's Monsters. And we're going to look at the Imperial Universal Monsters. And we have a few other things I'm working on. And at this moment, they haven't come to fruition, so I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. But there's a special episode that I hope will happen in the next couple of weeks. It's not for certain yet, but it should be an interesting episode if it works out. And then we'll have our exciting season finale. I always, at the end of each season, I tell you to get ready for the exciting season finale, as if there were going to be car crashes and explosions. And it's usually something kind of low-key and personal. And I am planning something kind of low-key and personal. And that'll be the exciting, I say that sardonically, the exciting season finale. I usually go out with something that's sort of a different kind of a topic. It's a little more personal, a little more... It's not the usual showing off monster toys, but something a little different. So I think that's it. We are nominated for a Rondo Best Website. So we're not a website, really, are we? We're a YouTube channel. But we're in the Best Website category. I'll put a link below where you can vote for Basement of Horror in the Rondo Best Website category for the Rondo Awards. And let's see if, hopefully I can do this without Grigori falling over. This is not a Rondo Award, but this is Rondo Hatton. A viewer sent that to me a couple years ago. And I definitely appreciate it. And I do have a Rondo, but, I mean, an actual Rondo Award, but I'd rather show this that a fan gave me. I think that that's more meaningful. Not that I don't appreciate the Rondo, but just this is, it's more personal. So, but I would like to win another Rondo Award. I have one. I would like to have a second one. I'm not going to get it this year because this category, Best Website, it's got all kinds of big websites that have like thousands and thousands of visitors, and it combines all multimedia, like, like this is a YouTube channel. YouTube channels, podcasts, blogs, vlogs, actual websites, discussion boards. It groups that all together into a website category. So you've got quite a mix. Chances are, to win a Rondo category, you really need many, many hundreds or thousands of people voting for you. It can't be just a few dozen people. It's got to be some big numbers to win. So I don't know that we have the fan base to pull that off, but I appreciate every vote I get. So you never know. You never know. Other fans of the other nominees could be asleep at the wheel this year. Who knows? So it would be meaningful to me if you would vote for Basement of Horror in the Best Website category in the Rondo Awards, and the link to the ballot will be in the description. Okay, that's it. Billy didn't come up. I was hoping Billy would come. I guess he's taking a nap upstairs. Oh well, I'll go join him in a moment. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Until next time, Basement of Horror will return.